A recent poll found that charitable giving by Americans is at its lowest level on record.
Which isn't that surprising, considering the, pandemic and unprecedented unemployment crisis.
But with illness, hunger, and social injustice gripping our country like never before, it's arguably a terrible time for donations to dry up.
Like many of us, you may have less money to part with in these tough times.
Or maybe you're one of the lucky ones who still has a good income and feel obligated to share the wealth.
Either way, we can make our charitable dollars go farther by being smarter about where we put them. When it comes to charities, some are good, some are bad, and some are just flat out scams.
Traditionally, the main factor that determines this is how much of the money they raise actually goes to people in need and how much goes to administration, overhead, and fundraising.
There are lots of organizations that track these numbers, like Charity Navigator or Give.org, and they typically consider a charity to be good if at least 75% of the revenue ends up being spent on aid programs. For example, the Breast Cancer Research Foundation spends 88% of their donations on actual research, treatment, and aid, while the Breast Cancer Relief Foundation spends only 3%.
Where does the rest go? Think executive salaries, luxury offices, marketing budgets, and fancy fundraising parties. And while it's understandable to want as much of your money going to direct aid as possible, there are some limitations to judging charities this way. Entrepreneur Dan Pallotta argues that the stigma against nonprofits investing heavily in salaries and advertising prevents them from competing for market share with for-profit companies. This, he maintains, is why charitable giving has been stuck at 2% of GDP for 50 years, and why nonprofits have been unable to solve our biggest social ills.
There's also a big disconnect between the spender of the money and the beneficiary of the product. If you buy a $20 takeout meal from a local restaurant, you will know whether you thought the food was worth the price. But if you donate $20 to a soup kitchen, there's no way for the people it serves to tell you how well your money was spent.
While there is room for debate about what constitutes a good charity, there's no denying that some are outright scams. These fleeting entities typically materialize online after a high-profile disaster like Hurricane Maria's devastation in Puerto Rico or Haiti's 2010 earthquake, and then quickly disappear after collecting thousands or even millions of dollars. They often directly solicit donations by email, phone, or door-to-door, hoping to capitalize on people's compassion for victims before they had a chance to vet the organization. The FBI estimated that most of the 4,600 charity websites that popped up after Hurricane Katrina were suspicious or unverifiable.
A good rule of thumb is not to respond to direct solicitation unless you know you are dealing with a reputable organization. Ask for some literature or a website so that you can investigate the charity yourself. Be aware that scams will often have names that are very close to familiar organizations, so the exact wording matters. Also, make sure you pay securely, like with a credit card or personal check. If a charity asks for donations in cash, wire transfers, or gift cards, that may be a red flag.
Of course, there are exceptions to this. If you have a friend or coworker who is raising money on their own for a cause you can get behind, using cash or Venmo is perfectly fine. Just know that you're trusting your friend's administrative skills to get that money where it needs to go.
Now that you know how to avoid suspicious charities, the next question is how to decide which to support. This is a very personal question depending on your individual passions and beliefs, but there are some important factors to consider.
First, studies have shown that after a highly publicized disaster, donations to related charities go up, but charitable giving across the board does not. This means that Americans aren't necessarily giving extra money to these charities, but rerouting their usual gift amounts from other causes. When a lot of people do that at once, nonprofit organizations not associated with the disaster can suddenly see their revenues drop.
And some organizations may use high-profile disasters to raise more funds than they need. In 2010, Doctors Without Borders stopped fundraising off the Haitian earthquake because they determined they had enough money to operate at capacity. But the Red Cross did not, raising almost $500 million for earthquake relief. Some of that went to plug up their existing budget deficit, and to this day, they have not fully accounted for how the rest was spent.
Now, we're not saying that you shouldn't give to big disaster relief projects, but be aware that just because everyone's attention is focused on a certain cause, that doesn't mean others have gone away. In fact, that may be when they need the help the most.
You should also be aware that Americans overwhelmingly give to American causes. While it's understandable to want to focus on helping your own country, keep in mind that a dollar goes a lot farther in other parts of the world, like sub-Saharan Africa. The effective altruism movement, which seeks to maximize the impact of charitable giving, suggests that giving to global health organizations like anti-malaria initiatives provides the most bang for your buck in terms of alleviating human suffering.
Deciding how much to give is also a deeply personal question, but these are the average yearly charitable donations for each tax bracket from 2016. It's generally considered more efficient to give large amounts to a few organizations rather than small amounts to many. The reason for this is processing costs. Every time a charity has to digitally swipe your credit card, it has to pay processing fees. If that's, say, $1 per transaction, then a $100 donation is only getting dinged by 1%. But if you make 10 $10 donations, suddenly only 90 of your dollars are actually making it into the charity's bank accounts.
Perhaps consider doing the 50-30-20 rule. Of the total amount that you've decided to donate, put half into one or two verified charities. 30% into community gifts like your church or school or local food pantry, and 20% into impulse gifts like disaster relief or helping out a friend on GoFundMe.
And lastly, if you can't give much or at all this year, you can still help by sharing and promoting charitable campaigns. Even though it's estimated that less than 10% of participants in the Ice Bucket Challenge actually donated money, the ALS Association still raised over $100 million. And that money directly led to new breakthroughs in diagnosis and treatment.
We know that it's a strange and scary time for everyone, and it's tempting to squirrel every dime away in preparation for more bad economic news.
But there's also more need out there than ever before. And even if you can't give as much as you used to, you might be able to make up the difference by doing it smartly. And that's our 2 cents.
Thanks to our patrons for keeping 2 cents financially healthy. Click the link in the description to become a 2 cents patron.